Yeah, hi. Thanks, everyone. I'm Dan Smith-Dirksen with the Seattle Housing Authority. Really happy to introduce our next guest speaker, who's the last one for the day. Thank you for hanging in there with us. This is a topic which I'm sure will be of a lot of interest and possibly benefit to you about the Landlord Mitigation Fund. Our guest is Jeff Shannon, who's worked with the LMP team since December of 2024. Has some experience working with Section 8 properties, particularly the tax credit properties. So, Jeff, thank you for being with us. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for asking me to speak to. We're always very interested in working with more landlords and getting some funding out in the community. Would you like me to share my screen for the slides or to use the set that I sent in earlier?
What works best for you?
I can present. Just give me 1 second to pull them. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, I think so.
Great. So yes, again, Landlord Mitigation Program is a program with the Department of Commerce. Involved in a lot of other activities in the state. And just to give you a quick idea of our program, in the last year from October 1st, 2024 to this October 2025, we've distributed just over 5 million in claims. Is to 2017 applications. So the average amount is just over $2,500. Our minimum is $500 for a claim, and the maximum is $5,000. And we've had some questions about our funding due to a lot of state and federal changes, but we are state funded entirely, and we get that from legislature appropriations and a portion from the document recording fees in the state. We have 2 open programs that I'll talk about in a little more in depth, and I'll just mention our tenancy preservation program that is currently paused until there's more funding provided for that. This was a program that if a tenant was behind on rent and was going through an eviction process, they could request through the court if they were experiencing low income, limited resources, or financial hardship. They could be awarded a 0 interest loan for the rent that they owed, as long as the landlord allowed them to reside in the unit. And Commerce would then provide that payment directly to the landlord, and it would be the tenant's responsibility to repay that to Commerce. Again, that's unfortunately paused for now, but we can hope for the future there'll be some more funds for that. The landlord damage relief program is one of our two open programs. And we've got two different ways to make a claim to this. And the first is for a pre-move-in claim. So this is before a tenant moves into the unit. To be eligible, the tenant does need to receive rental assistance. And this is largely determined by a housing authority's inspection. And so this is for units that haven't been participating in programs with a housing authority that are just kind of coming online to that. And housing authorities will either use HQS or Inspire inspection of standards. I believe Inspire's on hold for another year. So depending on who you're working with, it might be one of these standards. And if something in the rental fails the inspection, then our program can provide up to $1,000 helping to get those repairs made after the landlord pays for the initial 500. And then we can also pay for up to 14 days of lost rent between the fail date of the first inspection and the pass date of the follow-up inspection. And the documentation needed for this are both those failed and passed inspection forms, the signed lease, signed move-in condition report, tenant ledger, third-party rental assistance verification, and then the invoices or receipts for the repairs that were made. And the second type of claim under the damage relief program is for post-move-in claims. So this is after the tenant has been living in the unit. Again, eligibility is if the tenant's receiving rental assistance. And I will say for this kind of claim, we've accepted not only reoccurring rental assistance like from a housing authority, but also one-time payments also will qualify for making a claim. So that can be with like a community action council or a faith-based organization or other nonprofit. For this kind of claim, we'll cover damages that occurred during tenancy. This is outside of wear and tear. Within 1 year of the incident, you can submit a claim. For example, if a tenant broke a window, you made the repairs, you can submit that claim to us for reimbursement. So those damages while the tenant is still in the unit, you can claim. And then after the tenant moves out, you can additionally claim for unpaid rent, legal fees, utilities, and damages. And that's within 1 year of move out. We do not reimburse for lease break or rent responsibility fees. We've got to show that there's something material that we're reimbursing for. So the dates of actual tenancy are what are eligible for the unpaid rent claims. And again, the maximum for this is 5,000 and the minimum is 500 to make this kind of claim. This is by far our most popular program and claim type. And the documentation needed for this are the signed lease, signed move-in condition report, a tenant ledger, third-party rental assistance verification, and the invoices or receipts for the repairs. Our second program that is currently open is the Landlord Survivor Relief Program. And this is very similar to the damage relief program, except the eligibility is if the tenant is fleeing domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, or harassment. And here the landlord needs to return to the tenant their full security deposit. But otherwise very similar to the damage relief program. Again, maximum $5,000 for damages and unpaid rent.
Jeff, I'm sorry to interrupt. I should have asked before you began. Do you want to be interrupted with questions that come in as they're coming, or would you rather finish your presentation and take questions at the end?
We can do it along the way
Yeah.
if
So
that's a little clearer.
Sure. The question being asked is, what recourse, if any, does a landlord have when a legitimate claim is denied?
Yeah, so when we deny a claim, it could be for a lot of reasons, but it's typically if there's missing documentation. So if a landlord gets that back, it's not the end of the road. We'll be pretty specific in the denial notice. For example, this claim was missing the lease, so please upload the lease and you can send it back to us, and then we'll take another look. That's typically what happens if if there's missing documentation that the landlord doesn't have, then there's not a lot due to the requirements of the program. What we have required documents we need, and if they're not there, we can't go forward with the claim. So does that answer the question? I guess there can be a lot of reasons why a claim is denied, but it's largely missing documentation. And I can talk a little more about that later too. But getting back to the survivor relief program, largely the same documentation required, but instead of the third-party verification of rental assistance, what is needed is either a police report, a restraining or court order, a tenant signed and notarized self-affidavit, or a qualified third-party form. And that third-party form is laid out in this RCW 59.18.575. And then for all of our claims with either program, any claim type, after the claim is approved, then the payment is sent to the claimant, usually within 30 to 60 days from the approval date. That's just through our accounting department getting the payments issued. In our online portal, the claim status updates can be seen. So after you've submitted a claim, you can log back into the portal and see what stage that it's in. One thing to keep in mind is that by accepting funds from our program, the landlord agrees, or a collection agency agrees, to not pursue legal action against the tenant for any additional damages or unpaid rents. So that's something to consider with our program is, pretty much a guaranteed up to $5,000 to cover these damages, or if, the damages exceed $5,000 to consider pursuing the tenant for those funds.
So we have another question that's come into the chat, and it may need to be partly answered by a PHA representative. The question is, it takes 6 to 9 months to evict. We have an SHA funded resident that we've stopped taking payments for because they're in eviction procedure, I presume. With the legal fee, unpaid rent is way over $5,000. What are the other options to recoup this loss? That doesn't seem like it's only about damages.
Correct. And again, so unpaid rent is an eligible costs that we can reimburse. I'm not aware of other options when the claim is over $5,000. That's the max of our program.
And I would add on to that, that from the perspective of the Public Housing Authority, as long as the tenant is still living in the unit, then we do have the obligation to continue paying for it. So you can't just expect the Public Housing Authority to stop paying you if they're still living there.
And the last question there, unpaid rent. Yes, unpaid rent can be included in a claim after the tenant has moved out of the unit. We can't pay for unpaid rent while they're still in the unit, unfortunately. And so the online, to making an application, it's online. You can upload all the documentation and then check back in on your claim. You also don't have to do everything all at once. So if you start filling out the application and need to come back to it, you can save your progress. And you can see past claims that you've submitted, how much you've received for those. That'll be all in there. And this is kind of a walkthrough of what the online claim looks like. Again, here's our damage relief program. That's what you're applying for. You'd click on this orange button. Tenancy preservation program, again, is on hold, and then the survivor relief program. But I'll walk through as if this is a damage relief program claim. The first thing that it's going to ask is for a statewide vendor number. This is a way that the state issues payments. And to get this number, it's issued through the Office of Financial Management. I believe they're at about 5 to 7 days for processing requests for this number, so it's something to plan ahead for. And once you have your number, it'll open up the rest of the application and ask your name. And then here you can indicate what kind of claim type. And those are, again, the pre-move-in claims or post-move-in claims. It does ask specifically if the carpet was replaced, and that is because the program reimburses carpet based on a 7-year lifespan. And in those cases, there also needs to be proof of the original installation date of the carpet. Then you'll enter how much you're asking for in your claim. Claimant type, it'll ask if you're an agent or an owner. And then you've got property information. Here you'll enter the tenant information. You have the option of adding another adult household member, but it's not really necessary, but you can if there's multiple adults on your lease. And then this is a kind of a tricky situation because I know not always when a tenant moves out, they may or may not leave forwarding information. So last known address, if you have that information, you can enter that. But if you don't, then you just check this box, same as the property address. And it's same with phone number and email. If you have it, you can enter it there, but there's a box underneath that says you don't have the last email or phone number for the tenant. And there's a spot for security deposit. And I should mention the security deposit goes first for covering the damages. So if your deposit is $500, they'll actually need to be $5,500 in damages for you to receive the $5,000 from our program. And then you've got the dates of move-in date, if the tenant has vacated the unit. And then if they've vacated, I believe it'll have a pop-up window that says the date of their move out. We've got this window for adding any additional information to clarify your claim. And then here's the area where you would upload all of the required documentation. An area that's can be confusing is the subsidy inspection report. Again, that is the inspection report for a pre-move-in claim that's will be done by a housing authority, and it's not necessary if you're making a post-move-in claim. So that's why it doesn't have the asterisk next to it. But all of these other documentation are required for making a claim. After a claim is submitted, these are the status updates. Before being reviewed, it'll be submitted. So if you come back into the portal and check your claim, it'll say submitted. Once one of our staff are reviewing the claim, it'll say review, we're looking at it. And then the decisions we can make at that point are an adjusted claim. So for example, if a landlord has applied for damages and one of the damages they say, oh, the water heater, well, that's not a tenant responsibility. So we would subtract that from the claim and adjust with what is eligible for the program. At that point, it'll go back to the applicant and you can either accept that adjustment. Okay, that makes sense. That's not a tenant responsibility. Or you can deny our adjustment and provide more information or documentation. So for example, maybe the landlord did claim the water heater and it's because, well, the tenant totally dismantled it. So then that would be, with that additional information, you can send it back to us and we can say, oh, yes, that makes sense. We'll cover that. We can deny a claim. And again, we had a question on that earlier. It's not the end of the road. You can upload more documentation or clarify if there's some confusion about eligible costs and send it back to us and we'll take another look. And we can also just approve your claim and it'll move on to processing for payment.
Real quick, Jeff, on uploading additional information or at the time with the initial claim, question being asked is, can photos be uploaded?
They can be, they're not necessary unless, again, if there's something that's not clear to us, we can come back and say, would you please somehow clarify this information? If that's a photo, great. Or if it's more documentation, invoices, narrative, that's fine too. So we rarely look at photos. I believe when the program was new, that was a requirement, but not at this point. You're welcome to upload them, but there is a limitation on the file sizes and the number of files you can upload. So something to keep in mind.
And a follow-up question about payment approval. Does the deposit come into play if you're requesting a reimbursement during a tenancy as opposed to when someone's already moved out?
That is a great question. It does not. So again, if the tenant's still in the unit, you replace the window, we would just reimburse for the cost of the window without dipping into the deposit.
And one more question. Are you behind in payment processing at this point? And if so, how far behind?
Processing payments, I believe, is still uh, I would say 4 to 6 weeks from the accounting department. Um, and to preface that, for claim reviews, it's been a very popular year for us. So we do have a bit of a backlog right now, and I would guess we're about a month and a half on reviewing claims. So we are catching up, but again, we received quite a avalanche of applications this year. And again, I referenced earlier with the question about photographs, when you initially make an application, you can upload 10 separate files. And each attachment needs to be 1 MB or less. So something to keep in mind, if you can consolidate, sometimes landlords will have a separate file for each repair invoice. Sometimes it works better if those can be all scanned together into one file. Our program is subject to public records requests, except for the Landlord Survivor Relief Program. The tenant information is protected, but everything else is subject to being released to the public. So if we get any documents with personally identifying information like a social security number, driver's license, photocopy, things like that, we reject those and we'll contact you and say, will you please re-upload the lease, but redact the social security number, or take out whatever the information is that caused us to reject the document. The move-in condition report is really important. It's mentioned in the law that created our program, that a tenant needs to have signed the move-in condition report at the time of move-in, and that's a big requirement of the program. Some things that really help us with reviewing claims quicker: the tenant ledger should include a running balance with charges and the details for those charges, payments, payment details, and if they're reoccurring, and the repair or damage charges at the end of tenancy or throughout tenancy. Invoices, if you have hired a vendor to paint the apartment and they've got a business license, we just reimburse those as is. For in-house invoices, we ask that those are itemized by labor hours and then the invoices for the materials purchased. And if you have any questions throughout your application process, please reach out and we'll help you get through it. We like to think that it's pretty accessible and easy to use, but I know it can get complicated. And here, this is our contact information. We're a pretty small team, myself and my coworker Aman.